It's all me. All right. All right, Mackenzie, you're up.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mackenzie, and I am a frontline staff counselor for the AOT program in St. Petersburg, Clearwater, Pinellas County, Florida. Our program itself has been up and running for about 1.5 years now. So we, I understand when Ashley said hitting your stride, we kind of hit that about 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're doing well over here. So
you hit your stride just as COVID hit.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, a couple months before, and then COVID hit, and then it slowed everything down a lot. Just because we were, trying to get the hospitals to implement, Zoom protocols, and everyone was a little not as quick as Directions for Living was in getting the ball rolling, but we're finally there. So
excellent.
So your program and Asha's, Mackenzie, got started at the same time with the same SAMHSA grant. Well, I should say they got funded at the same time. Albuquerque took a little bit longer to get up and running because of some issues they had at the beginning, but should be pretty much the same place.
Paige.
Hi, my name is Paige Mcdaniel. I actually work in the same program as Mackenzie in Pinellas County, Florida. And my role, I'm an MSW student right now. So I'm not, so I'm not in the clinical role yet, but I'm kind of dipping my toes in. In my program, I don't necessarily work directly with the clinical staff, but I'm working with the legal team. So we're kind of finding an interesting role for me, and I'm helping identify some of the clients that might be good fit for AOT right now. So really here just to listen, learn, and be guided further.
And so are you there for this academic year?
Yes.
As your field placement? Excellent.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Rhea?
Hello. So we're kind of in the same position as Beth is. We're down here in Granbury, Texas. We're just now getting hired up, and I'm just kind of overseeing getting all the hiring done and kind of getting it implemented. So that's kind of where we're at.
Excellent.
Mac.
Good afternoon. Matt Coleman from Oakland County, Michigan. We are the northwest suburbs of Detroit. We, for a long time, were seen as the forerunner for AOT in Michigan. Few, if any, other counties were doing much with it. But since working with you all, it's become clear to me that there's a lot more that we could be doing. We've been using AOT pretty much like probation. Holding this order over a person's head that if you don't toe the line, you could end up back in the big house. But we are trying to get our court interested in doing some meetings with the judges. We are still wondering what we can do with our case management staff as far as, is there any kind of enhanced service or attention that we can provide for these people who are on orders. Pretty much a person's life is just the same once they get an AOT order, other than they have this thing over their head.
Oh, that's interesting. How long have you been doing that in Oakland?
Long time.
Longer than I've been with Oakland County since, I want to say 2007.
Yeah, I think as long as there's been Kevin's Law, that's been the one county that's had it up and running.
Oh,
Michigan.
excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Worth. I am from Youngstown, Ohio. I'm a behavioral health navigator. My role is positioned out of the hospital, but I'm also able to go to the different community providers. We have utilized AOTs for a long time, probably even longer than I've been working in the field, but with a new probate court judge, he became more involved, And so the last couple of years, we have really had a more formal program that we've implemented. We have a treatment team. We meet regularly. Our judge has court twice a month for the people who are on AOTs. They present at court, talk about how they're doing. So that's been going on for about 2 years, and it took about maybe a year and a half to really feel like you're hitting your stride and making adjustments and things like that.
I always say that if you feel competent in a new job in the first year, you're not doing it right. It always takes a good year to feel like you've got it down. Samantha. And if you have a camera, Samantha, oh, there you are. Good to see you.
Sorry, I'm working from home and I have kids, so I'll try to keep them out of the background. I am here in Lancaster, Ohio. I'm a case manager with the AO team. My partner, Daniel, his internet's not working. He was on here. So I'm just here to kind of get back into it. I do a lot of the community outreach and community resources. And of course, I work within the court system with Daniel. And primarily anymore, it's a lot of landlord work, trying to find housing for all of our folks. And with COVID, we are struggling to get what I would consider new people, just because they're not visiting the hospital or a crisis center as much. So that's been an implement that we're still working out.
Robin.
Hello, I'm Robin from Seneca County. Just joining this as my first meeting. We have tried to get an AOT program going, and we've just run into some obstacles, and I saw this as maybe an opportunity to get some support as we try to work through the obstacles.
Awesome. Thanks, Robin. Is that Seneca County, Ohio, Robin?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
So you've come to the right place. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what the whole purpose of this meeting is. So far in our learning network, which we launched in the late spring, we've divided the learning network into different stakeholders or professions. And so one time a month, we're holding these discussions with the different factions. So last month we had judges. In June, we had the AOT monitors. And next month, we're doing the AOT champions. So August.
Meaning the NAMI folks, advocates, people who are working on the grassroots level to get programs up and running.
Yeah. So August is Clinicians Month, and I've been really looking forward to this, not only because I'm looking forward to meeting you, but from hearing from you. So what I see this meeting is a place to share ideas, to learn from each other, support for sure. What we do day to day is really hard work. Troubleshoot difficult situations. I'm not exactly sure where this came from, but the saying that none of us here is as smart as all of us. So I think it's really important to bring challenging situations to a group. And so here we are. So what I'd like to know is what your thoughts were about coming to this meeting. What were you hoping for? And just feel we're small enough that you can just open up your microphone. I don't have to recognize you or anything. Just feel free to.
I was hoping to see some more qualified professionals here. The area that I am continuing to work on, it's getting a little easier, but that I struggle with is determining whether a client is likely to benefit. It's very subjective in the 45 minutes or so, or hour and a half that I might have with them on a first meeting. So I just was hoping for some feedback on what people think makes, you know, if you look at the person as they came in and you look at them and they're succeeding now, what did you pick up on when they came in that you might have identified as saying, yeah, this person's likely to succeed?
Yeah, and just to put Asha's question in a little more context nationally for everybody, because everyone's state law is a little different, but many of them do have the same provision that New Mexico's does that I'm going with, which is it's actually one of the criteria you have to prove to the court by clear and convincing evidence that this is somebody who is likely to benefit from AOT. So obviously, I mean, that's always a question you're asking yourself when you're doing an evaluation in any state, but in certain states such as New Mexico, it's especially important that you have very concrete answers to that question, because it's one of the things you're going to have to present on in court.
And the corollary is, what do you do for your folks who are not, for a variety of reasons, might otherwise qualify and they need the services, but they're not likely to benefit from the structure that AOT has in place in your community?
So I'm going to throw this back at you, Asha. I mean, you've been doing this for about 8 months, 9 months, 10 months. So what do you use? What criteria do you use to make that decision?
Sometimes my gut is telling me to wait, and I'll hold off and do a second half of the eval in a few days or week. And if the person is has disappeared off the radar, then they're not likely to benefit if we can't contact them. So, you know, then we definitely leave that open for, you know, future referrals. We try to contact them. We give them, you know, ample opportunity. Sometimes they look really good in the initial eval, and this is somebody that we just had that looked pretty good. Like, he really needed the services. His condition was pretty severe, but he was able to converse and agree on a plan. And as soon as he got out from inpatient, he decompensated again and ended up back in inpatient. And so what happened is, inpatient got him committed involuntarily to our state hospital, but wanted a discharge disposition for him with us because the state hospital couldn't take him for 3 weeks. And these two things are like contradictory to me. On the one hand, things are bad enough this person is committed to the state hospital, but on the other hand, you want him taken care of in an outpatient setting. And I determined that his condition was just too severe for him to be able to benefit from the ways that we can do case management and other kinds of care. And so we did get that case dismissed. Yeah, I think that's what they call it. I'm still learning the legal terms. That's all new to me.
So it was not, it was more about the acuity in
that case.
In that case. What other things have you seen from people who are not likely to benefit? Just curious.
The challenging cases that we have gotten in and have not seen the benefit from are people who just refuse to adhere to treatment. And we don't have, I know some states there are legal sanctions. We don't have that here in New Mexico. We're relying on.
They don't have that either.
So there aren't any AOT programs that have quote unquote teeth.
You would call teeth, like you could hold someone in contempt of court, or no?
None of that. So we do have some things though. We can get treatment guardians for people. If they already have charges, they might have the opportunity to have those charges lessened if they do participate. So there are some ways that we can, you know, that there are consequences. And of course, there are natural consequences for not adhering to treatment. But so there's been 3 different ways that it's been challenging. First of all, client gets evaluated, looks good, and then disappears off the face of the earth. And if that's for more than 30 days, we have to let the case go because the affidavit expires at that point. And the second is this new one that it's my first time really seeing this, like this person is too acute for AOT. Prior to this, I thought, well, yeah, we should be serving the most challenging cases. And now I'm realizing there are some outliers that we are not going to be able to help. So that's a new thought process for me and kind of where I'm, you know, asking some questions. And then the third is these people that we have brought in the first 6 months that I am realizing, like, I wish I had picked up on some reasons why I might not have gotten them in. On the other hand, we have other clients that looked very similar and they're doing well. So maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just going to be like that. You know, sometimes you hit the mark and sometimes you don't, but I'm interested in other people's experiences.
What does an AOT look like for your clients?
Our program has intensive case management. We have the ability to provide therapy in groups before COVID. Now that's a little more challenging and our therapy staff is down, so we're referring out for that. We have the ability to do medication management. We have a variety of housing programs that we access for people. The intensive case management is the most important part of our program, in my opinion. And I guess if you don't know what that is, we are functioning as close to an ACT team as we can with, if y'all know what ACT teams are, if we're actually functioning as close to that as you can with like a quarter the staff ratio, but we have few enough clients right now that we're doing a lot of things in home. I go out to homes to give injectables. Our nurses can go out to homes. We have nursing staff available to do weekly medication boxes and give injectables, and I give injectables. We can do blood draws on campus. The only thing that we don't have is physical health services, but we're a comprehensive behavioral health provider, just kind of small and nonprofit, which is how I like it.
How long does an AOT last?
For our program?
Mm-hmm.
We usually, it's a year,
Okay.
pretty much across the board.
And do they have to show up at court?
Yes.
How often?
So it was supposed to be monthly, but the availability of, there's a few reasons, and I actually shouldn't speak to them because I'm not really sure what they are, but we've recently gone down to quarterly, which we just started that. I don't feel like, I don't feel confident that that's going to be effective, but I think it's how things have to be right now for a variety of reasons, and hopefully that'll shift back. So
Is COVID a factor in that? Is COVID a factor in that? Is why they've gone
I
down?
don't think so, because we're doing everything on Google Meets. I don't think
Right.
it's COVID. I think it's that we have had a challenging time having enough judges, enough judge time, right? We just have one judge, and it's been challenging for her to have enough time to meet the needs of the new court cases, the new court hearings. And then as we have more clients, seeing each client once a month, that's, you know, each client's another half hour every month. So it's been pretty challenging for us to do that in the 2 half days max a week that we have with the court.
Yeah. I thought you had two. I thought you had Judge Brickhouse and also the other judge who wrote the op-ed for the paper, the man.
Yeah, and that somehow didn't pan out. I don't know the details behind that. But they're working on it. I do know that they're working on it. Again, I'm not intimately familiar with the problems there, but that's my understanding of it.
I know for us, we have a judge and a magistrate, but they'll rotate who's going to do those court cases for them. And they do it as like a group block. So they'll bring everybody in and see them kind of all at one time, one after another in succession, unless somebody isn't comfortable with that, and then we do them privately. But that tends to make it go a lot faster. They're no longer like 15-minute increments for each client, and we're able to update and go through that in like a quarter of the time that we were. And that has been really, really helpful in terms of going through their court cases on a regular basis. Now with COVID, everything's online, and unfortunately a lot of folks just aren't comfortable doing that. However, that is what's been working very well for us.
So do you really have time in that format? Do you have time for the judge to really talk to the client, you know, and have a conversation about how they're doing and what they need to be doing?
For us, we categorize our clients based on case management needs, and that's how we also categorize them based on court need. So we have intensive, which is what you get when you first join, and for that you would see the judge every single month, and primarily you'd be meeting with me or Daniel 3 times a week or more. After that, depending on where you're at, you'll step down to where it's quarterly, and then every 6 months. If you're still on there at that time, then it becomes that 2-year commitment. That's the extent of ours. So it does help if you break them down, because then you're not getting everybody all at one time. I think at one point we had almost 40 clients, in a little teeny tiny area.
Well, and it occurs to me that that's part of the problem is every one of our clients is new within the last year, of course. So, you know, that's part of the challenge, I guess. We only have 1 or 2 clients that are really ready to step down, you know, where I would say regardless of the availability, I would still say they only needed to come in every 3 months for their, you know, that would be my opinion.
Yeah, and me and Daniel, we'll sit down together and we go through our caseload, and we determine, is this person someone who really needs to be in front of the judge, either for that positive reinforcement of, hey, you're doing the good things, you're on track, I'm glad you're accomplishing goals, or we need to redirect you, and using that black robe effect to kind of push them a little bit more to success. And that's been really beneficial. Don't get me wrong, there's a few that it hasn't worked for and they still kind of make themselves MIA. But for the most part, it does create a really good environment for folks to come in and be positive and realize what they're doing is a good thing.
So are you saying that everybody, like let's say it wasn't COVID and you were in the regular courtroom, everybody's in the courtroom at once, or?
Everybody's in the courtroom at once unless they ask that they don't want to be. And we do have one gentleman who does not like that because it's part of the paranoia that he has. And we just separate him off and we do him last and he comes in when nobody's in there.
And about how much time do you have per average per client?
Honestly, it's about 5 minutes or less because everybody's in there. It's very informal, and we're wanting to use the judge, especially as we've grown the program, as more of a positive reinforcement than a negative one. So when they're in there, it's like, hey, how are you? Tell me about what you've accomplished. And most of the time, they're nervous anyway, so they don't want to talk. So Daniel and I will kind of be like, well, you know, they did this really great thing, and the judge reinforces that positive attitude. And that has worked amazingly. So it's only about 5 minutes. If they need something more, or if we know that there's a major issue that needs addressed, we will save those for the ending part of the court meeting. That way they are getting that extra time, or if it runs over, they have that as well. And that is really good because
Thank you. That's a good, I would not have occurred to me that it could be done that efficiently.
Yeah. And we got that from another AOT program that's functioning up in Akron here in Ohio, but it works so well. And we're very fortunate. Our judges are very, very passionate about the program. So that helps.
Yeah, no, that, you know, it's an interesting division in approach there between the programs. There are many that do it the way that Samantha's described, right? Where you just, it's kind of taking excuse, I think, from the mental health court approach, where you do it in open court, and the cases are called in a strategic order, right? People who are newer to the program are called last to get the benefit of hearing the judge talk to other people, right? Because they're going to hear other people get praised to the hilt for doing great. They might hear another person, you know, where the judge is a little bit, you know, more forceful with them about how things are not going well. So it's a great way to acclimate people to what the expectations are, to, you know, have them hear their peers and want and get, you know, be inspired by wanting to do well and get praised like others are. You know, there are some judges who are not comfortable with that approach for a couple of reasons. Some worry, sometimes there's a worry that it's like revealing public health information, right? Civil commitment proceedings are supposed to be confidential proceedings, and sometimes there's a concern in some programs that, you know, we shouldn't be talking about people's cases in front of others. And others just feel like people open up more and are less nervous when you sit down with them, you know, more one-on-one. So it's really kind of mostly about what the judge is comfortable with, I think.
Yeah, because our judge does it differently. So he meets individually with each person who's assigned to Fresh Start Court. So not everybody who has an AOT might be expected to attend Fresh Start. We call it Fresh Start Court.
Yeah.
The judge meets with each client about 15 minutes, and the whole treatment team is. For us, when somebody has an initial hearing, once they have an initial hearing and they're found subject to a court order, they will be discharged on an AOT.
Yeah.
So the mental health board, combined with the treatment team, their provider, family, the client themselves, we will determine, we usually discuss that. We have couple of meetings that we meet with, and we talk about, hey, do you think this person should be assigned to Fresh Start Court or not, yay or nay? And sometimes we'll say no, and then after a month or so we say maybe we need them to show up at court. Then we'll talk to the court, and we'll have the court assign them a hearing to show up. And some people don't need it. Some people, the 90 days is enough. For us, our judge has been great. He is very passionate about it as well. He says he'll try it. It doesn't hurt to try. So if you're on the fence, let's give it a shot, or let's wait and see. And if they fail, then the next time they show up, we'll give it a shot, So he's real open about that. And that's kind of our kind of philosophy too, is like, well, it's worth a shot, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And sometimes you have to figure it out, it's more than one way to skin a cat, and you never know. Like you said, you have the perfect person who thinks they're going to be perfect for it and they don't. And then you have the one that says, oh, this is never going to work for it. And they are super successful and they're like, yay, prove me wrong. We're happy that you did.
Right. And that's really gratifying to hear, because the three of us at TAC really believe in that, it's much better to err on the side of let's give this a try.
Yep.
So, I would say for those of you that are kind of stuck on that criteria, is this person likely to benefit, to not read that too narrowly and be too quick to say, no, of course they won't because they have this or that challenge. Sometimes you can be surprised.
Yeah, and I know it's New Mexico's law, but I can't understand how you can know whether someone's going to benefit without even trying. I mean,
yeah, I mean, that's exactly where the problem lies.
Yeah. I think, I think it's maybe something that you can opine on more knowingly on a renewal, right? Or if it's maybe a reason to not renew an AOT that has been a failure, even though the person continues to meet criteria. But, other people have said certain factors lead them to think the person is not going to succeed. If a person has an intellectual debility that's so severe that they just don't think they can understand what it means to be under.
Right.
Substance abuse issues sometimes make people think someone won't benefit. We could talk about that a little bit, but.
Yeah, if that were a disqualifier, I'm not sure New Mexico
Yeah, right.
have
It
any
certainly
clients.
shouldn't be a blanket disqualifier, right? And, we had a conversation with the new grantees yesterday where this kind of came up, and I think the consensus was that it comes down to primary diagnosis, right? If there is somebody who has a mental health issue who has a substance abuse issue that is just predominant over their mental health issue, that it's like the main thing that is causing them difficulty in life, AOT may not be the way to go, because, we don't really have evidence that it's effective in getting people to abstain from their substance that they're addicted to. But we have lots of evidence that it helps people engage with their mental health treatment. And for many people with co-occurring disorders, that alone is going to have enormous benefits and will, reduce their need to self-medicate. So, you certainly would never want to say, if you have a substance abuse disorder, you're not right for this program. That would, yeah.
Right, and of course that's another area where you may not know the full extent until they've been in a little while.
Right.
So okay, learning curve. Thanks, you guys. That was all very helpful.
good. Who else would like to share why they've joined us this afternoon?
We have kind of the opposite problem in Oakland County, well, all over Michigan, really. Our legislature apparently feels that everybody should be on a Kevin's Law order, and the criteria is very thin. You just have to be identified as a person with a mental illness, and there has to be something indicating that you're unlikely to comply with treatment. That's pretty easy to satisfy.
Do you find you have a lot of people that don't respond to your program, or?
We haven't been able to do any kind of formal studies, so I'm not really sure how to answer that question. We do find that there is a certain amount of people who are very ill, who they don't really appreciate the order, and I think this is partly what Ryan was alluding to. They're going to do what they're going to do. They have a lot of hospitalizations. They're most likely going to continue to have a lot of hospitalizations. We also see people who, and I was trying to work this into Asha's question, who they don't particularly think they have an illness, they don't particularly think they need treatment, but by golly, if they see an order in black and white put in front of them, they're gonna do it. And very often they quit treatment right after the order expires, but well, we kept them in treatment for a while.
Right, but that's what renewals are for. I mean, one of the, I think, frustrations we as a staff have is there's this notion sometimes in programs that the end of the court order means the person is supposed to be done with AOT, and it's not right. I mean, the end of the court order means it's time to reevaluate whether they are still appropriate for AOT. And, you know, I think the research and just our experience tells us that for most people, a year is usually right around the sweet spot for when people seem to develop those habits when they're ready to go off it. But, you know, there are going to be people who, as you described, Mac, they're just, the court order is the only reason they comply with treatment. So there's no reason not to just keep renewing. As you know, maybe for the rest of the person's life. It's not going to be the typical case, but there's no failure in that. It's not like your job is to help people, is to get people to graduation necessarily. Your job is to, you know, keep them engaged with treatment and out of the hospital and jail. And for some people, their baseline is such that that's going to mean keep renewing that court order.
And yeah, thank you for that, Brian. And I'm not suggesting that we don't renew orders. We do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And why some get renewed and some don't, I presume that just has more to do with the individual case manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the most striking cases that I ever worked with is someone who, when not taking medications, was floridly psychotic, dangerous, but when he took medications, very little psychosis is left. Goes to college, takes care of all his ADLs, even takes his medication. Take him off the court order. But no increase in insight, no connection between taking this medication means he stays housed. No connection. And that is the kind of person that is going to be on a court order for a really long time.
We do have some of those. A few names come to mind, and one in particular, because we know that when he's not in treatment, he's the kind of guy that you read about in the papers and hear about on the news, because he'll hurt somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, in discussing the court, I am curious to find out, there are any other programs that kind of have the similar struggle that we're having. So our judge, we meet every 90 days for our clients to come to court because our court order expires after 90 days. So we have to reevaluate. At that point, myself as the counselor, the psychiatrist, they offer feedback in court about how the client is doing. But our judge kind of has this stance or this idea that if the client doesn't want to participate, then they let them go. Despite me having, like, because I mean, I'm, as a counselor, I see all of my clients at least once a week, case managers 3-4 times a week. So like, I mean, we have had a client that was thoroughly psychotic. Again, one of the ones, you know, kind of like you mentioned, you'll read about in the paper one day, and he was talking in several different languages during his court hearing, still clearly showing to everyone present that he needs the support of our program, but because our judge, because he didn't want to do it, he was let go, and has since reoffended, been back in and out of the hospital. And for me, like, that is such, I don't know, is there any feedback on how to, address that, you know, because we bring it up and then it kind of just, you know, goes quiet after a while.
That's Pinellas County, Mackenzie?
Yes.
So
And
That's like business as usual in mental health, right? If the client doesn't want to show up to appointments or whatever, we don't track them down. And so what is the, you know, if that's going to be the attitude, then AOT doesn't serve its purpose.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I describe it as we can't make people do anything, but we'll keep trying whether they want us to or not.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So that, yeah, tell me the name of the judge, Mackenzie, and if the judge has been on this all along, because I was, I guess about 1.5 years ago, and I'm kind of disappointed to hear that.
She has been on this all along. There was, because I've worked for this agency for a couple years now.
Yeah.
So I was brought into the program by our old supervisor to kind of help, because some of the treatment structure that we have is very similar to a program that I used to work in, as far as like bi-weekly staffings and things like that. And there was a transition from like, okay, I am presenting clear and convincing evidence that the client would still benefit from the program. The judge would grant the order. Obviously, you know, like you say, if the client goes MIA and they're, you know, we do our due diligence. But I don't really know when that transition kind of happened. But that's kind of the mode of how it is now, to the point to where, you know, a previous supervisor who's no longer with the agency, the approach was, well, if the client doesn't want to do it, then what's the point of going back to reevaluate in court, because the judge is going to dismiss them anyways.
Yeah, that's good for us to know about, because I'm going to try and do some outreach to your judge and see if we can change that perspective, because, I mean, you know, as you say, I mean, it's just, and as Asha says, it just completely undermines the very purpose of AOT to look at it that way.
Right.
You know, sometimes judges, they have a tendency to think of AOT that way because of the fact that there are no traditional teeth attached to the order. They figure, well, I can't enforce this, so what's the point? And, you know, they're missing the point. They're just the fact that we can use this as a tool to bring people in for a short-term hold and get them back before the judge and remind them of, hey, you know, we may have to release you now because you don't meet inpatient criteria, but we all know where this is headed because what's happened the last 8 times. Or work with us, you know, just the opportunity to do that much and not have to wait for the person to decompensate and act out in some dramatic way before you bring them in for that short-term hold. That's all the teeth you need.
Yeah. You know, and there has been some like positive changes that we have seen. So when we have clients, kind of like you talked about, Samantha, that you feel like could really benefit from coming to that court experience, she has been willing to like see them like off record, kind of just like, our court day is on Wednesday. So if I'm having an issue with a client, you know, we can easily set it up for clients to come in. But I just, you know, like you said, if we're not kind of reinforcing the court order, then it's kind of like missing, like I said, missing the point. So
Yeah, right. I'm making
I want to share.
to follow up on that.
I just want to share one example. I keep hearing, you know, it doesn't have teeth. I was observing one court case, and there was a young man who had not gone to his previous 2 appointments. The case manager had shared with the judge ahead of time that he had told her he was not going to go to his appointment that was coming up in a few days. And that was when he was, you know, scheduled to get his injection, and she was really concerned about him because he was decompensating. So they had worked out an agreement ahead of time where the judge had contacted the sheriff's department, who is one of the AOT partners. And so when the young man came to court, the judge asked him, so I understand from your case manager that you're not planning to, you know, attend your appointment on Thursday. And she said, is that right? Sorry.
Sure, why you're getting this.
Oh, there we go. And so she said, well, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a sheriff's deputy come to your home at 9 o'clock to pick you up for your appointment. And he said, well, what if I don't come to the door? And she said, well, that's between you and the sheriff's deputy. I'm just telling you, he's going to be at your house at 9 o'clock on Thursday. And so, you know, I asked later on, so what happened? And the sheriff's deputy came. Young man got out, got in the car. They took him to his appointment. He got out, went in, had his injection, came back out, and the sheriff brought him back home. You know, it just, and there was nothing, you know, there was nothing they could have done had he not come out, but he didn't know that. and they had worked it all out in advance, and it worked out great. And today he's doing phenomenal. He's out of the program and has followed through with his treatment. He just needed that, you know, that little incentive there. And so there are things that, you know, you can do if you're creative.
Do most of you have a direct line of communication if you need it to the judge?
We do, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just commenting on direct line to the judge. Most of our communication goes through our public defender who acts on behalf of our clients. She is very passionate about the program, so a lot of our communication goes through her and then to the judge as our route of communication.
What about your mental health board? Are they involved in it and communicate with your court system as well?
As when you refer to board, I'm assuming probably like our provider, like our grant providers and things like that. So not directly, no. We have daily or weekly county meetings where we sit down with our county board members who kind of oversaw the grant writing of this. And the judge is present for like the first 10 minutes, offers her feedback on court. But then from there, when the team is offering our feedback on whatever's going on, that's our communication to them.
Yeah, mental health board is a very Ohio-specific thing. Maybe Betsy wants to explain that real quickly. It's just basically your mental health authority. You know, your like Pinellas, I think your Pinellas County Department of Mental Health, right? I guess that's who you work for, right, Mackenzie?
So our program is through like an agency, like a nonprofit agency. But so the people above us is the Pinellas County, Board of Mental. Yeah.
That agency is the equivalent of what Michelle is asking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, they don't. We wouldn't go through them to speak to our judge. They wouldn't see that as an appropriate means of communication.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So our mental health board is very involved with our court, and I think anytime that we have issues like that, they will communicate with the court as well, because they provide some funding for, you know, some of my position.
Right.
You know, some of the, I think because in Ohio, the case managers can't get paid for court appearances. I think our board covers that. So
oh, I'm sorry.
To attend court, then they, you know, so that way the case managers get credit for productivity. But that I think is what was very helpful, that our, you know, when we have issues like that, because you have judges, you know, they're the king and they get to make the rules sometimes, you know, regardless of what the treatment team thinks. But if you could get them on board, yeah, because that's very frustrating when you have all these recommendations and then they don't listen to them.
Yeah, for court, for us, it's kind of more of like for the client and for us as well, like as like the staff is like, oh, all right, 90 days is coming up. Like, let's get ready for court. It's not, you know, from the literature that I've read on the AOT program where it talks so heavily about the court process in itself, it doesn't feel as heavy as I feel like it should be for the program. Granted, like, you know, our agency as a whole, and we pick up, you know, in other places, so I think our program is doing phenomenally well, but yeah, just hearing what I've heard about the court process and other programs, it's definitely different for us.
Yeah.
So Mackenzie, have you had a chance to look at the AOT implementation white paper that we did? We'll send you the link if not, but you know, we wrote up, you know, what we consider like a compilation of all the best information we have about how AOT is practiced and the variations among the programs. One thing we try and do in there is be very careful to say that it's not absolutely necessary to have an active, involved judge. And a lot of places, you know, you meet some of these judges out there, you wouldn't want that because they don't really have the skills in engaging with people and communicating, speaking sensitively to people with mental illness. They just don't know how to do it. And so they really mess things up if they were super involved. So, you know, there's no real right or wrong about that. There are a lot of really effective programs. I mean, New York City, which is where most of the data and the studies come from about how effective AOT is, Their judges have almost no role. They issue the court orders and they get out of the picture. So, you know, I would just say don't feel like that's a must, or you're not right, not have a judge who's really getting to know people and engaging with them. I think it's can be a really nice thing. But there are other ways to work around that by having kind of the clinical team play more of that role.
Yeah, and I think we've done that, and it's good to hear that feedback. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think it's really important that the clinicians understand their role as the primary engagement mechanism, because as we've said, for most people, the court order is going to fall away and treatment will in some form or fashion with some agency or not. So really want to make sure that it's the agency that is treating the person that has the closest connection. And it sounds like you're doing that.
Yeah, we have, I don't know how big other teams are. We only have 2 counselors and 3 case managers. So yeah. And we've had several acting supervisors. So the 5 of us are very, very close as far as like, you know, focusing on, you know, just our program really.
How many of you have the qualified professional as part of your team versus using qualified professionals from the community who are willing to testify?
So you're talking specifically about prescribers?
Well, it's outlined in our statute that has to be a nurse practitioner with a specialty in psychiatry,
Right.
or an MD, a psychiatrist, or a prescribing, I think it says prescribing psychologist. That's our statute though, so I don't know. I'm just curious whether that's typical for teams to have somebody or not.
Yeah, and I was just, I think, talking specifically about the role outlined in the law, which is the role of coming to court and presenting to the judge that this person meets criteria or not, to make that case and present that evidence. So I think so are you asking then whether it's common that person be an actual continuing member of the AOT team, or if other places tend to use someone who then bows out after they've made that evaluation?
Yeah, both, and also whether programs have dedicated prescribers. Maybe you're qualifying, like for me, I function in both capacities. So I'm just curious how other programs handle that.
I can speak for our county.
Please.
Basically, we have 2 ways you can get on AOT. There's the old-fashioned way, which is from the community. In that case, typically what happens is we have a PhD psychologist who does an assessment of the person, and then that person testifies at the hearing. But the way that people mostly get on AOT is from the hospital, and AOT becomes just part of the treatment order. And that again is typically done by a psychologist. In very rare cases does a treatment professional from the community outpatient agency appear in court. Maybe I shouldn't say very rare, but it is unusual.
So is that psychologist part of your team, or are they contracted, or?
That psychologist is contracted to testify in the outpatient cases. For the inpatient cases, it is a psychologist that is contracted by that hospital to testify in court.
Okay. Thank you.
For ours, we have psychiatrists in-house. So one of our providers, whoever they're assigned to as their primary care for that, will take over. Typically, we get ours from the hospital. So we have a close connection with Fairfield Medical Center and Mount Carmel, and both of those we work with to get our AOT folks. Generally, if we're doing the court, like their initial hearing to determine if they're mentally ill, the judges will go to the hospital to complete those, so that they're doing them in that environment, and then they'll see the doctor after that.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Hey, Amy, I just want to address the issue that popped up earlier in terms of communication with the court. I know a lot of programs have identified somebody to sort of serve as their court liaison or their AOT monitor that serves as the liaison between, well, in Ohio, between the board, the court, the provider, to make sure that things are happening on schedule, that people are getting that the treatment team is meeting the needs of the individual, that they're showing up for appointments, and if they're starting to decompensate, then they can notify the court. So it's kind of the one person. So if you've got a client that's starting to slip, that you can notify the monitor, and the monitor can arrange for them to be brought into court if they need to, or if there's a service agency that's not fulfilling the individual's needs, or they need their medication changed, or an appointment they need to there's an issue with their medication and they need to get in to see the doctor sooner. It's sort of this one individual who kind of makes everything run smoothly, and just as that point of contact for everybody that's involved in the AOT program. So something to consider if you don't currently have that. We at Treatment Advocacy Center, we have a draft position description of what an AOT monitor's responsibilities might look like, if that's helpful.
And again, that's also one of our recommendations from our white paper. And Betsy can tell you that they look very different. Everywhere you go, it looks very different. Some are from the treatment agency itself. Some are part of the board staff. So it just depends. And in terms of your question, Asha, about what others are doing, so in my experience within Ohio, just like Max, the majority of folks came into the program through the hospital. And so the initial orders were used hospital records and hospital psychiatrists. In Ohio, the initial orders for 90 days. So when those orders need to be renewed, then it's the treating psychiatrist. Ohio doesn't allow for anyone but a physician to testify, but it is the treating psychiatrist that does that. And they actually do the hearings, the continuation hearings at the agency where the psychiatrist practices.
So we found providers in our community reluctant to learn the process or commit to the process. So that's why I've ended up doing all of our evaluations, even if the client goes to a different prescriber afterwards. And that's actually been working okay for us. One of the hospitals will let me come in with the case manager, and then we're working on video for the others. But yeah, I would say at least 2/3 of our referrals are hospital referrals, but the hospital docs don't have time for that.
Right. And then in New York, where Brian and I had a chance to visit last year, they have specific psychiatrists that are employed by the county. Were they employed by the county, Brian?
Well, the city of New York.
Oh,
Yeah.
New York special.
Yeah.
But yeah, a government. And their job was just to do the evaluations. Treating psychiatrists never did the evaluations.
Okay. So there's lots of models.
Yeah,
Sure.
So yeah.
It makes sense, if a person is coming from a hospital stay, to have the doctor who's been treating them at the hospital come to court and give that testimony based on their evaluation, but they will not stay involved as the person's treating doctor and are discharged.
We collaborate. It's not the physicians are more than happy to collaborate with me,
Yeah.
and we do get a nice transition of care doing it the way that we're doing it. So
Nice.
seems to be working out right now.
And
COVID's put the wrench in everything, of course.
I think that's so important or so amazing that you get a chance, if you're going to be treating them outpatient, to go in and meet them beforehand, because
Great.
you can ease that transition off you're going to be.
I go with their assigned case manager, and we have actually found that to be remarkably helpful. I want to say we started doing that 2 or 3 months into getting referrals, and yeah, I mean, even though we sort of wish the community could step up a little bit more, I think that this is providing the best transition of care one could hope for, at least in our state and what we deal with here.
So I'm curious, not only from you, Asha, but from the rest of the room, on how does that transition get made? I mean, I could see where if you're the one testifying for a court order, that the participant, and that's what we at TAC call patients, that could reflect negatively upon you. Not reflect, but that, you know, you're seen as the one who is putting that person in this program that they may not want. And, you know, the same thing with other providers. As the AOT provider in a brand new court order, how do you get in the door with some of these folks who don't want to be part of the program?
We come in with the attitude that we're offering them something, not taking something away from them.
Awesome answer.
Yeah, it really is. And
Awesome
I have a
answer.
question.
Yeah.
I have a question. So, the first thing is when we were talking a while ago, were we talking about how we run the program and how the court is involved in the program? I kind of came in like really late, and I'm sorry for that.
That's okay.
Okay.
We're
Is
just
that
glad
what
you're
we-
here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad I'm here too. Were we talking? So we were talking about how like each facility or whatever runs the ALT program. That's correct.
How each facility runs it?
Well, not facility, but like how each program is ran, essentially, how each ALT group is. Okay.
Sure.
So how ALT works for me is we would get a referral from like the majority of everybody said, from the hospital or from a clinic, from one of our clinics, and then we would have a designated crisis responder go out there, and they would do the evaluation to see if the client wants to be a part of the program, and if they agree to the program, then there's a checklist that the DCRs go over, mainly being if the client had any inpatient, if they've been ITA'd within the last 3 years. And so that's normally how we get our clientele. From there, they write the petition, the DCRs write the petition to the judge, and then if the judge is like, okay, this is great, then that's how we pretty much get all of our clients and individuals. And they worked, of course, the clients worked with us in our program within the clinic. I'm not sure how, I was listening to everybody else describe it. I'm just like, wow, that's a whole lot of processes. And I didn't know that that to be an ALT client-wise there's so many different ways for each client to receive and start the service. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the process you're describing, it sounds like the philosophy is kind of like what Mackenzie was saying about her program in Clearwater, where it's only for people who want to be part of it, right? I mean,
yeah. And that's that was my second question. Our program is like 100% voluntary. If the clients, if they agree to be part of the program on Monday, then on Tuesday they're like, I don't want to be a part of it. Then it's like, okay, well, you can go. And I was going to ask, are a lot of you guys' ALT programs, are they not voluntary?
Does someone whose program works differently want to speak to that?
I can't really speak to that, but I'm wondering the same kind of thing, because I'm just in the point where this week I've been meeting with the court administrators and the public defender and the state attorney's office and just trying to figure out the pieces of how this is all going to play out and what the process is. And so we were talking to the crisis unit saying, would you be able to call us and identify a potential participant? Could we come in and do an evaluation and confirm, yes, this would be a good person to proceed with the petition and getting them involved with AOT, or should we not? And we've kind of been told that the hospital will need to do a petition, but it's going to be very difficult for a court order to be issued, because if somebody doesn't want to do it, the public defenders are not going to do what's in the best interest of the client. They're going to do what the client wants. So they're going to make it difficult for us to get them enrolled involuntarily. And if they want treatment voluntarily, then they can't have AOT because it's supposed to be involuntary. They have to just do outpatient. And so we're thinking, how are we even going to get referrals?
You're not going to have anybody.
Exactly. So where do we find that middle ground, and how do we get everybody on the same page so we can even get referrals and get working with people that need this program?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you raised that. So is that the Pecan Valley program that's just now being funded under?
This is in Fort Myers in Lee.
Oh, you're Fort Myers. Okay, right.
And so we have Judge Sweat, who does our mental health court and our veterans court. And I was envisioning that this program would be very similar to that process, where we have a staffing and we have a court and people are court ordered to participate, but it's kind of voluntary, involuntary. And I'm learning that it doesn't look like it's going to be that way, at least not yet, unless we can kind of lead them in that direction.
I hope we can move it in that direction. I really do. So let me try and address both of the points that you guys have made. First of all, in answer to Tori's question, AOT, as we conceive it, is civil commitment. It's no more voluntary as a legal matter than being civilly committed to the hospital is, right? It's a decision that the system is making for you under their what's called the parents patriae power, their right to make decisions for people who are not in position to understand their own best interests, and saying, you meet these criteria, therefore this is something we're going to commit you to. And to me, it's just a tragedy to look to shape AOT as if it were a purely voluntary program, because it's losing the opportunity to help a lot of people who can't get to that point by no fault of their own. Their insight is lacking and they can't understand their own need for it and would benefit greatly from it. So it should not be thought of, I really feel strongly, as a voluntary program. But all that said, the practical reality is most people do enter AOT willingly and often, cheerfully and happily, right? They're coming from a hospital stay usually, and they're viewing this as like kind of a ticket out of the hospital. They hopefully have, some grasp on stability for the time being. That's the reason they are ready for discharge. And they do want to do better in the community than they've done before. So it's not that for the most part you're going to have these adversarial hearings, but I do think you always have to be prepared to have them, right? If the person is agreeing to it, you can do what's called a stipulated court order. You don't have to have a big fight in court where the public defender is trying to knock down all your evidence. You can say, okay, everyone agrees this person meets the criteria, both sides agree, and the judge can enter that court order and get it in place so that when the person's point of view starts to change, they have the knowledge that they're under court order and we're going to have that protection in place. But we don't want to frame the program as if that has to happen. And, to what Beth is saying about this concern that the public defenders are never going to go for it, well, it's really not up to them to go for it or not. If their client wants to challenge the petition, that's absolutely their right. But at the end of the day, the judge is going to do what they find the evidence indicates is appropriate. And if the evidence is there, right, if the petitioner can show by clear and convincing evidence that this person meets the criteria, the public defender can't do much more than, they'll make their argument why the evidence isn't good, and the judge will say, yes, the evidence is good. And it wouldn't be that hard to overcome a person's objection to it, unless there really is some reason to doubt that the person meets the criteria.
I think that's why I would like to have our AOT team be able to be involved in some way in getting in there early with a referral, identifying a potential participant, helping to evaluate, helping to complete that petition, because we have more of a vested interest in getting that participant enrolled in the program. Where if we're relying on the hospitals to do that, the hospital and the state attorney said, well, doesn't it benefit them more to do a civil commitment to a psychiatric hospital, because then they're filling a bed. They don't want to give you someone for your program. They want to keep them in the hospital because that's how they make their money, even if they could go with a lower level of care in AOT. So I'm kind of, whichever direction I turn, I'm kind of meeting these barriers of they want to keep them in the hospital. We don't want you to do anything to them involuntarily. And I'm just trying to figure out how we're going to get everyone on the same page.
That is so frustrating to hear, because it's like, oh, let's let them get sick so they need to be in the hospital, when the AOT is meant to stop that from happening. Let's keep them out of the hospital.
Right. And if I could get them in, if I could get Judge Sweat involved from mental health court, I think he would be right on board. This is right up his alley. But according to the court administrators, they're not even going to have the judge. They're just going to give these to magistrates. And it could be terrible. One of 4 magistrates. We don't even know which one it would be at any given time. And so we don't even have them. We have to go through their court administrator.
Beth, I assume you have treatment guardians in your state. I mean, isn't that something that exists everywhere? Treatment guardianship?
Not
I'm
in the
not
way
sure
it does
how
in
they'll
New
play.
Mexico.
Oh,
Yeah.
It doesn't exist in other places.
No, that California has something very similar called conservators. But yeah, the New Mexico treatment guardian law is pretty unique in terms of
Oh, wow.
the commonality of having somebody with a guardian. Yeah.
That's unfortunate. I was just going to say, if you did have such a thing, that could be a good referral source, because by definition, if you have a treatment guardian, you're not competent to consent. So.
Yeah. So.
Interestingly, Judge Sweat participated in the judge's call, didn't he, Brian?
Yeah, he did. He did. And I have met him. You know, I don't know, Beth, if you saw my presentation when I was down there in Fort Myers.
I didn't. I'm too new to the area, but
Okay,
I've heard that people have participated, and you presented it in a way that got them really excited about it, but nobody seems to understand how to actually bring it to fruition and how to get everybody working together.
We're going to help sort all that out.
I hope so. Thank you.
That's really good. That's really good for us to know about. And yeah, I really do hope Judge Sweat is going to be the AOT judge. So we'll see if we can overcome whatever resistance he's meeting.
For us, all of our clients are, it's not a voluntary program. So they're court ordered, and until otherwise said, you know, they are court ordered. And again, if they have a right and they're told their rights, so they have a right to request a status hearing at any time to get off of the AOT, but nobody's there voluntarily. However, that being said, we do try to present it in such a manner like Asha's program does. It's the buy-in. We're here for you. This is about keeping you out of the hospital and helping you reach your goals. And what are your goals, and what do you need to be successful? So while it's involuntary, we very much try to present it as we're here for you, and it's all about keeping you out of the hospital. So I think we do a nice balance of that. Some buy into it, and some know better and they don't care, but I think we do a nice job of trying to balance both.
So I have to say,
sorry.
I have to say, Beth, you're the only person I've heard in recent times say that the hospital wants to keep people. My experience is more that they just want to get them out yesterday.
And really, they said that the criteria to commit someone to the hospital is much easier to fulfill than to commit them to an outpatient treatment program. So they would just do it because it's easier.
Is that true, Brian?
Well, it's kind of apples and oranges. I mean, it's true. The AOT criteria is about your history, right? So if you don't have that certain history of showing that you don't comply with treatment on your own, then you're not going to meet the criteria. Whereas the inpatient criteria is just about your current condition. So yeah, there's going to be a lot more people who will, meet the inpatient criteria. But once you stabilize them to the point where they have a right to be released, then the question is, do they meet outpatient criteria? And if so, we ought to release them with an outpatient order so that they don't come back. You know, you can't hold somebody in a hospital against their will any longer than it takes to stabilize them and get them to where
Right.
Right,
The other thing that they mentioned, and speaking to what Michelle said, so you get somebody to buy in. So you've got the court order for 90 days, and then you need to repetition to get it renewed, get a
Right.
stay of the order. I don't know the legal knowledge yet either, the legal terminology. But if they have a buy-in at that point, is it still considered involuntary? Because I was told that if you go to get it renewed after 90 days and they say, oh, it's going great and I like it and I'm compliant, then you no longer need an involuntary commitment. Now you can just go to outpatient. So they're telling us, we'll give you 90 days to stabilize them and then they'll be graduating out of AOT into something
Yeah,
else.
no, they are fundamentally missing the point.
Yes, and I'm not sure how to get them on board.
Well, if we can get to them, we will try and do that, you know, if they'll listen to us.
Okay.
You know, hopefully that the program is going to work with us as a treatment, as a technical assistance provider. And
That is the plan, yes.
Okay, great. So that should give us the opportunity to get everybody in, you know, a virtual room.
Okay.
Get everybody on the same page.
Right.
That's what we need, because this has so much potential to help so many people if we can get everybody to work together.
Definitely.
Well, you've just begun, so.
Yes.
And Betsy, just to note, you know, that's a place where we can really kind of bring the grassroots pressure to bear, because that's where we have Daleen Odell, who's really the driving force behind everything that's happened there. And, you know, she can be helpful in helping us maintain the vision that we all have had for.
Mhm.
Excellent. Well, if